Is there any way to reduce the chances of getting a mental health condition?
Let's talk about it.
A very good evening to everyone watching. Welcome to the Rooted Minds podcast. I'm your host Gabriel, and together with me is Matthew and Jalin, who are our co-hosts, as well as our backstage crew, Shafika and Stephanie. Yay! Right, so for those of you who don't really know, we are final year students at Ngee Ann Polytechnic's Business and Social Enterprise, and Rooted Minds is our final year project.
This will be the first episode of our 5-part series podcast, where we aim to bring parents fun and interesting content regarding the topic of mental health and resilience in families. Although this podcast is for parents of young families, but fret not, as it is very applicable and relatable for anyone in the family.
I mean, clearly we are not, we are a bit too young to be parents, and that we do not have much practical experience in terms of mental health and mental resilience. That's why we'll be inviting guests and experts to have a conversation with them to learn more about the topic on mental health and mental resilience.
Right, so without further ado, let's invite our first guest on the podcast today. Let's welcome Mr. Donovan! Yay! Right, so I think Mr. Donovan, you're familiar that today's topic is going to be on mental health and resilience in families, right?
Yep.
So maybe you could, to start, you can share with our viewers, what is your expertise or your experience like relating to mental health?
So thank you first and foremost for having me on this podcast, right?
It's our pleasure.
Yeah. So my name is Mr. Don, right? I've been working with young people for the last 10 years. Currently, I'm a counselor with Ngee Ann Poly, student counselor. Previously, I worked in social services, spent about 7 years in MOE.
Right.
And I'm also a part-time lecturer with SUSS.
Oh, on mental health also?
Specializing in counseling ethics.
Counseling ethics. Right. So, right now you're practicing as a counselor. Is there like a certain like levels of counseling that I don't know, like there's supposed to be a scale between like counselor then like psychologist, psychiatrist, I don't know.
Not exactly.
Not really.
Yeah. Unless you say it's a position or rank or title. Then you have counselor, senior counselor, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So like as a counselor, like what's your jurisdiction? Can you like give medicine and everything?
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah. So just to distinguish, right?
Yeah.
Counselors do therapy, right? Psychologists, they can do therapy, but they kind of do a bit more on assessments, right? And then there's psychiatrists who are actually full doctors, and they can do therapy as well, but they tend to do a bit more on the dispersing of medication. Right. Yeah, so there's some slight differences.
So as a counselor, do you do like the diagnosis also?
No, we will work together with the team, right? So if it's requiring a diagnosis, we refer out to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, medication and that. So one way I usually kind of put, to explain counseling, I would say that a counselor takes care of a social, emotional or mental wellness issue. If it's biological, psychiatrist. Diagnostics, go to a psychiatrist. Psychologist.
Right. So actually interesting that you brought. So that means there's also a biological factor to mental health also, influencing like, yeah, I know that some mental health conditions are also like hereditary in the family. Things like that. Like there's a higher percentage you get it. Okay, I think, but first and foremost, maybe let's get a better understanding of what this entire concept of mental health is about. Yeah. So I mean, what is mental health to you guys? Like, what do you think?
To me, it's it's similar to physical health in a way. So, cause like to me, having good physical health means that you're able to like do daily activities physically without suffering or being injured. So to me, mental health is similar in the sense that you can do your daily activities without having like emotional distress or like psychological distress. And that's how I view mental health. Yeah.
Right. I know some people, they view it the other way around, like in a more positive, because the what you mentioned just now is like what? So is the absence of distress, is it?
So something like that. Yeah.
So what exactly is mental health like? I mean, to the explain it because you're the expert here. Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. Okay. I would view mental health as a continuum or mental wellness, right? And I like to say that health is not the absence of negative emotions and things like that. So very often people think that if I experience any form of stress or distress, right, then maybe I'm unwell. But I think we also want to acknowledge that life has its own shares of up and downs, right? And that's going to happen. Good's going to come, bad's going to come. And health might be better painted as how do we respond to such challenges, right? So the ability to work things through, right, and to hang in there, yeah, I would say. And that kind of ties into what you want to talk about, resilience, right?
Right.
So yeah, mental wellness is really about how do we respond to life's challenges. Yeah.
But does it have to do anything with like feelings? So like if I were to have like both, like if I were to not have any like positive or negative feelings, does that mean I'm mentally healthy?
If you feel nothing, you'll probably be dead. Okay, so maybe I also want to put a clarification, right? So in psychology, or rather in layperson's term, we kind of mix up, we use interchangeably what emotions are and what feelings are, right? To be more specific, emotions are what we experience biologically, right? So your heart rate increases, you feel tense, tightening of muscles. So that's a physiological response. That's an emotion, right? A feeling is what we kind of like interpret and we make sense of it, right? So what we think about it, we label it, we name it, and then we call that cluster of responses of an emotion, we label it as a feeling, right? So actually, you think about it, right? Surprise and fear, or excitement and kind of surprise, they are very similar in emotional or physiological responses, right? But then how we interpret the event and we kind of call it, either excitement or fear. Okay, think about it. If you go on a roller coaster ride, how would you feel?
I think Jialing is fear.
Fear. And you?
Excitement.
A bit braver, right?
Right.
And so the interpretation of that, what you call that, the feeling, right, is actually more of a psychological construct, if you will. Yeah.
So that means like, is there actually a difference between like excitement and fear?
They're very similar, right?
Yeah. It's the body reactions are the same, right? So that means it's like what we own self, like it's something we create for ourselves, is it?
How we choose to has to do with our perception, right? And how we choose to call it or label it, right? And so we say I'm feeling excited or I'm feeling fearful, right? And that kind of directs your intent and how you perceive the entire situation.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not right to say happiness is an emotion.
Happiness is a feeling.
Feeling, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, every time I say
So
emotion.
emotion is a feeling. I mean, yeah.
Okay, right. Well, thanks for the clarification. Yeah.
But, but the thing is everyday people, I think even with people that are struggling mentally, they experience positive and negative feelings. But so where do you draw the line between like for a person to identify themselves as being unhealthy mentally?
I would go with chronicity or duration, right? So too much of anything, good or bad, is not healthy, right? So, for example, depression might be viewed as too much of a low mood, right? And then, we call them crazy, but maybe if it's like the Joker, right? It's forever smiling. You also say this guy is not too right, man. He's forever happy. Yeah. So one of the things also about mental health is that because it exists on a continuum, right? Walking this, what we call the middle path or balance or moderation, even in terms of our emotions, I would say, right? That not that we don't enjoy the highs and the lows. They're going to come, right? But we kind of deal with them in such a way that, we don't dwell there too long on the extremes. Yeah. and we kind of learn to regulate and shift ourselves when it's too much into either extreme, kind of regulate ourselves to come back to the middle path.
Right. So what if it's the other way around, like what Jia Ling said just now, where there is a lot of highs and ends in the both sides, like happiness or positive or negative feelings, right? So like if it's like very close to the middle all the time, is that person like considered a mentally healthy person?
Okay, so too much of anything, extremes included, middle included.
also included.
Yeah, because if someone is unable to experience the fuller range of emotions, means there's nothing that really excites him. Every day is mundane, right? I think that would also kind of suck the joy out of living, right? So middle path, right? But also, experience the full spectrum lah. But don't stay too long. Don't stay too long, right?
Right. Okay. I see. Wow. So actually, mental health is not something that is a linear path, but it's very like up and down kind of thing. Kind of like what's that graph called? I forgot. Sine curve. Secondary school math. Yeah.
Curve bell.
Yeah. Oops. Right. Yeah. So I mean like maybe to give an example, like COVID just happened, right? So I think that we all know that COVID's impact has really I guess decreased the mental health of Singaporeans during this period of time. Even now so lah, but when it first came out, I think is the most scary part because it's very uncertain. And there was that period of circuit breaker as well, which is, I think we can talk more about that later, isolation and everything. Yeah, so I have some statistics here. So actually, during the circuit breaker period, right, a study was conducted by IMH and 1,058 participants aged 21 to 49 were surveyed. So they found that 8.7% of them met the criteria for clinical depression, 9.4% met the criteria for clinical anxiety, and 9.3% met the criteria for severe stress. So are these like numbers something that is worrying, or is it like a normal thing, like on average, like to you as a?
So COVID's impact on mental health in general, right? I think we acknowledge that mental health concerns have risen, right? And usually I like to view it as the baseline anxiety, right? Fearful of the future, fearful of the unknown, right? And they keep coming, Omicron, when is it going to end? So all this uncertainty increases the baseline anxiety levels for people. And with that, I think it's not too difficult to imagine how this pushes, right? Someone who is borderline anxious already, right? And then just tips them over into experience more anxiety than would be healthy.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, earlier I think we tried to frame it and say that mental health is not really the presence or the absence of positive and negative emotions, right? But could be looked at, one view is how do we respond to these challenges, and anxiety, COVID, right? The anxiety that COVID brings is one such challenge that I think a mentally healthy person we need to deal with. The other thing I want to put out also, I mean, I'm sorry, it's not too it's in my head, but
It's good.
So we also want to acknowledge that there are people who have also certain temperaments or personalities, right?
Right.
And when we talk about peace and this calmness, there are also people who start off with a baseline which is more anxious, right? Now, COVID will definitely affect this person with an anxious temperament or personality a lot more than someone who's more easygoing, right?
But why would they have a different baseline though?
Okay, so we want to acknowledge that each of us have a different temperament, and that's an inclination or disposition, natural disposition.
So it's not because of external factors?
I mean, different theories, but as we grow up, right, so you can see like some kids are a bit more happy-go-lucky.
Yeah.
Some kids are a bit more uptight, like, this is mine, cannot, So you have different personalities and all of that. And when you talk about mental wellness, we also want to acknowledge the traits that are inherent within each of us that makes us different, right? And that also factors into how do we respond to challenges in life.
I think in Singapore, correct me if I'm wrong, but the highest, the most prevalent mental health condition is major depressive disorder, right? Which is depression. Yeah. Then I think from when I was doing research for this topic, right? So I was trying to see whether there's any baseline to compare with the changes of COVID-19, what kind of mental health conditions come out during COVID, what kind of mental health conditions were there before the pandemic. Yeah, so I think that from a 2010 study and a 2016 study by IMH, I think, yeah, they found that generalized anxiety disorder was one of the highest rising mental health condition in Singapore. Yeah, so why is it that anxiety is rising even before the pandemic?
I mean, we knew that Singapore it's kind of a stressful society, exams and all that. I think the government has done its fair share in trying to take away exams, right? But that doesn't discount the kiasu parent or the tiger mom and stuff like that lah. And okay, in terms of cases, top 3 has always been relationships, family, and anxiety, right? At least within the education system, the kind of cases that we see, these has always been the top 3. Anxiety, acad related, right, used to be number 1. With COVID, it kind of switched out, right? And family is now number 1 and anxiety is number 2. Anxiety relating to acad stress. Yeah. So I think that's one way to view things, how anxiety is on the rise, but at least for now, it's interesting, right? Baseline's gone up, but the issues have switched.
Right.
Yeah. That'll be an interesting study.
Does that mean that, although anxiety is on the rise, family relationships is even worse?
Relationships might be more than academics a cause of stress or anxiety.
Right.
Yeah. Seems likely, at least for young people, because we are talking about statistics within an educational institution. Yeah. For the wider population, I'm not too sure. Yeah.
I think actually I'm quite interested in COVID scenario or any scenario, or how does actually a mental health disorder develop? Because you say it's because of stress and all these different or staying too long at one side of the spectrum of mental health, or the feelings that you are feeling. So after I stay too long at that point, is it because I stay at the low point too much, then I'm numb to the rest, or the high point too much, then I'm numb to the rest? Is it that kind of ideology?
Okay, so we want to recognize that it's very complex, right? When you talk about how a mental disorder develops. So we don't want to reduce it or oversimplify it.
Right.
So being a complex matter, we earlier talked about a biological component, hereditary, environmental, right? But if I were to just address it through the lens of feelings and experiences, okay? By and large, let's say we begin with a person who is, peaceful, calm, right? Just very happy, generally. And then there's a bit of stress, and actually there's this term called eustress, right? So eustress is healthy stress that challenges us to grow, right? It's like, you sit for an exam, I'm going to do well, just a challenge.
Right.
And then from there we have things like stress, right, which is a bit more forceful and demands a bit more of us. Okay, you push it a bit more, and then you can probably come across things like distress. Okay, now that's still all right if we kind of don't stay too long there, right? So like a death of a loved one, that could be a bit tragic, right? Loss of a relationship. So you're in a distress for a certain amount of time. And that's part of normal, and then you get out of it after appropriate amount of time. So we talk about duration. Now what happens is, if someone is unable to find their way out, right, and then they stay there very long, it leads to frustration. Chronic frustration and no lack of support, right, can lead someone to feel hopeless. Right? So you begin to see how it goes. And with hopelessness, loss of meaning, loss of purpose, not being able to see a way out, right? And then you have things like depression, right? And so you see it's a continuum, and it takes time for hope to be kind of sucked out of someone. Right now, of course, I'm only describing depression, lah.
Right.
Anxiety might fit somewhere into the point of stress, right? So they experience feelings or emotions like anxiety. Yeah. So one of the things we encourage, at least a good therapist would do with their clients, is to try to help them be aware, right? Identify how they are. What is their personality type? What is their inclination? And the more self-aware we are, I guess, the more equipped we are to respond in a better appropriate way, lah.
Right. So actually, self-awareness is key to like recovering from a mental health condition.
I would say so, yeah.
So there's no way to like psycho someone without letting them know that they have a mental health condition.
Brainwashing, manipulation, all unethical.
Unethical. Oh, so that's like actual practices.
No, those are not actual practices.
Those are not. Okay.
Shouldn't be,
Right.
So like we are on like academic stress, because just now you mentioned about the eustress to like de-stress. Then you say like too much of anything is not good, but because since like eustress gives you the drive to like do better, then I think for like students, like constantly throughout our academic years, we'll always be in that eustress phase. And sometimes it will turn to stress like during like more peak periods, exam periods. So is there a way like people can move back from like de-stress, stress back to like eustress?
Good study habits. No. So I'm thinking it's all about managing, right? So when it's post-exams, by right, automatically you kind of should revert. You should expect that a person reverts back to post-exam and relax and all.
Oh, that was a thing.
Oh no, we're all in stress.
And maybe, if the results aren't good, or if you get heat from your parents, or if you get, extra tuition, or if you have to work, and I think these are also real world issues, right? Yeah. So there are students whose financial issues and they need to get a job. So they are constantly in this, it's not acad, there's another area that is pressurizing them. So how do we manage then? And maybe that will also lead into another related topic, which is self-care. How do we manage ourselves through, how do we respond to all of these things?
Yeah.
One of the things also, thanks for raising up. One of the studies we did recently was we discovered that actually for high risk, and high risk we define it as people who might be facing a lot of pressure. How do they respond? Actually, there are two groups. The one that we are more familiar with would be those who don't do well academically, right? Lack of financial support, family stress and all that. So they drop out, they don't show up for class, stuff like that. But we also acknowledge that then there's another category, and this is maybe possibly a bigger category, who are the high performers, overachievers. We call them type A personality, right? So these people are so driven that they don't know their own limits, right? They don't acknowledge limits maybe, right? They push themselves to excel above and beyond, and sometimes to the point of the breaking point, right? And we also want to acknowledge when we talk about resilience, how do we care for these people, and how do we also carve out space? The message of resilience, right, might be helpful to those who are at the bottom, right? If you fall, if you're meeting something, right, stand up again, right? Whatever doesn't kill you, make you stronger. Some of these things that the world is messaging. But the same message might be, what pushes the high achiever type A personality overboard, right? Because these people, if you tell them to do even more, right, that's not going to be very good for them. Yeah, so maybe it's a pull back a little bit. So, a brake and an accelerator, they need to come in together. Yeah.
Right. Exactly how has like COVID-19 affected family dynamics in young families? Yeah. For families, I would imagine, right, greater proximity, right, greater length of time that we are spending together, and things that might have been able to distract and kind of like avoid
right now, because of all the confinement and stuff, you have to, and you live, you sleep, you rest, and you work in the same place. Right? So a lot more communication is required. So if this wasn't already present, right, there's a lot more opportunity now for friction. Yeah. So in a way, it kind of like forces issues to come up, whatever it was unaddressed. Yeah.
Right. I think that brings us to the topic of like resilience. So like the example we gave just now on like COVID, and I think COVID is a very unfortunate example of how life just hits you. Like everyone would at some point of their life face like a very stressful incident, right? Or something, whether like you just now said, like the death of a loved one, grief and everything, or it might just be from school or these external factors like natural disasters or pandemic. So since everyone will be facing something like this, right, I think that really like brings out the importance of having good mental resilience, which is I think based on like my own explanation is the ability to be able to respond or adapt to a hard situation. Maybe later you can give us a more accurate explanation of what exactly the term mental resilience is about lah. So what is mental resilience about?
So how I understand resilience is just the ability to bounce back up, or the ability to deal with tough situations.
Right.
So to me, resilience is really a response, right? Some people crumble, right? The moment something happens. Other people hang in there, they work things out, they are patient, right? Resilience to me is also something very, very different from stubbornness. Right? I think there's an element of creativity in resilience also, where a person hangs in there but also looks to do things differently. I think to me stubbornness is just hanging there, refusing to change and keep banging your head against the wall, over and over again. So resilience brings this quality of creativity also for me.
Right, I see. So I think like is resilience, does it also encompass like being able to know your limits? Like because like the entire like concept of mental resilience is to be able to bounce back, right? So what if I'm able to like know, okay, I won't be able to handle something like this, then I prevent myself, or like I anticipate that something bad is going to happen, so I prepare myself. Like is there an element like knowing your limits also?
I think that would be fair to include that within it. Right? So if someone is aware of their own limits, and resilience is the opposite of that, would be maybe to fall into to give up hope.
Right.
Right. So rather than feeling hopeless or and all that, so someone who is resilient might say, okay, maybe this is out of my competency, my abilities, but let's look at how I could still get it done, how I could still, so the element of creativity, the element of hope, the element of resourcefulness. I think this might encompass what you're talking about, the resilient mental attitude.
Right. So as much as it is like being able to have resources to bounce back, it's also a frame of mind to be able to what's that term? Like link it not to yourself but to external factors, and be able to know your limits as well.
To see resources, to see strategies, and rather than just surrender.
Right. So like exactly how does a person build up mental resilience?
This is a great question. I'm just like tempted to say some people got it, some people don't. But no, obviously that's not true. Because as we were talking about it and we were discussing, right? There are many components, including optimism, for example, right? Hopefulness, that we are now putting into this definition, because we try to simplify, right? But it's more complex than that.
Right.
And so you have different things feeding into it now. When we talk about temperaments and how each of us are different, someone who is more hopeful, right, more optimistic in general, right? We can say that this person might be slightly more inclined towards resilience because this person doesn't give up and all that. But that is also a bit simplistic because there are other things that come in. Resourcefulness, strategizing, being able to see possibilities, right? Determination. Yeah. So if someone wants to develop resilience, right, it is actually quite holistic, the concept, the one we are talking about. And maybe it's just, if you boil it down to the simplest definition, how do we first be determined, right, bounce back from adversity or from failure, right? So depending on what is necessary or needed for this person, what are the aspects that we can build or begin to build for this person? Yeah.
Right. So I mean, like, is it similar to like just now I gave the example of like if a person who has a mental health condition, right, they are aware of their mental health condition, so they are able to act on it. So it's the same thing for resilience, right? So if a person gains awareness or education about resilience, they'll be able to like increase it, like, because like you mentioned, there's many factors involved in resilience, right? Like that influence resilience, like optimism and whatever. Yeah. So with all the different factors involved, right? If someone were to be able to know about what, like understand what are the different factors to it, they can like curate it and increase their resilience from there.
Yeah. So one thing would be also control, right?
Yeah.
How does the person view their ability to control what's going on? Control their controllables, right? So if that person feels that they have a bit more control over the situation, then that it would be the antidote, I think, against hopelessness, right? So, yeah.
So, like, when should resilience be developed? Like, is there a key area or moment in your life that you should be developing mental resilience?
Absolutely. I think like everything, it begins in the family, in the home.
Right.
Right. Earlier we talked about modeling. I think when we recognize that young children have certain temperaments, right? From young we can begin to inculcate resilience by beginning to not over-shelter them, get them to be exposed age appropriately, and then to challenge them and let them figure out things by themselves, right? So there's one school of thought, the tabula rasa, where it's a blank slate. Like children, just let them run around, they'll figure things out, don't intervene.
Right.
I don't think that's very wise also. I think a good parent would also be able to recognize how their child is like, right? Is this a more easily frustrated child, an angry child? Is this a more optimistic child, right? Or is this child, a sulker, whatever the temperament is, and then begin to balance it off, because there's always, like we say, the middle path requires moderation and balance. So someone who's too overly optimistic needs a dose of reality, right? The appropriate challenge. Someone who's always angry needs to be to learn a bit more patience, right? Someone who gives up easily needs to be challenged a bit more and to kind of be a bit more supported and to find out that, I can, right? And then someone who's overconfident, right, also needs to kind of come back to earth, right? So this moderation, I think, begins when the child is young and the parent sees that, and the parent can kind of like, moderate it, right, to adjust the learning processes for their child. Yeah. So that's the growing up experience. And then as children develop, they also see or take a cue from their parents. How does mommy and daddy respond to adversity? Right? So if they see mommy like getting frustrated, throwing things on the floor, right, giving up, crying in the corner every night, then does this child really learn resilience? Maybe, right? It really is how they perceive. Right. But the modeling, I think, is also important. Firstly, for the child to watch, and then to emulate. Yeah.
Right. So like the entire, I don't know, how would you say, like, because a child is influenced by many factors, right? Not only their family, so also like their interaction with their peers at school, guidance from teachers, the environment that they grow up in, whether or not like the physical environment rather than emotional. So how much would you say is dependent on parents in terms of the mental resilience? Like just an estimate like.
I think that's a great question. I would say initially in the formative years, a bigger part belongs to the family, right, the environment. But as the child grows up, and I think, let's say we take the time where they begin to enter school, socialize, peers, teachers, academics comes in and all, then it splits kind of like three ways. So three big portions of a young person's life would be family, school, and friends, right? And how each of them provide the environment and modeling, and would be the exposure that this child has to kind of develop their qualities, which is resilient included.
So, but the question I want to ask is, because you said something about like having the parents be there for their child, be a role model for the child when they're young, but like I'm looking at it in the point of like a low-income family versus a high-income family, because for those low-income families, their parents are normally not around to teach them or guide them. While, I mean, I'm not here to like stereotype high-income families, but compared to those high-income families where they perhaps have more time for their children, so would that mean like a low-income children, like children from a low-income family would have a weaker mental resilience compared to a children that comes from a higher income household?
I don't think that would necessarily be the case. Yeah. So when we talk about, I think one of the things that in your example was time spent. Right. The amount of time, I think I want to contrast that against the quality of time spent. Yeah. So if I don't have a lot of time with my child, but the time that I do have with them, I spend quality. My kids know that I'm for them, and that my kids kind of like know that I'm out there working and I'm not giving up. I'm bringing, I'm doing whatever I can to provide. Right. This relationship, this bond, and that modeling, as they see that, okay, the kid might realize you're not too well off, but their mom is always hopeful and they're always having a smile on their face. They're always telling me it's going to be okay, right? I think resilience can still be caught in that sense. Yeah. So
in the case where like parents don't spend as much time with their children, is it harder for children to build on their mental resilience, like without the family?
I mean, if family is totally out of the picture, that's going to be tough, but like I said, there's family, friends, and school, right? Very often what we find can be, even if the father and mother is not present, grandpa, grandma, a significant other, an uncle and auntie that steps in can also provide that appropriate mentoring or role modeling for them. Okay. Peers, I'm a bit more cautious because they're same age, right? How 10-year-old, what kind of modeling is going to happen, right? And as much as our parents out there would say the school, supposed to educate my child academically, morally, and the whole works, even character and all that. Teachers, we don't know overwork, underpaid, that kind of stuff. Am I really going to entrust the character of my child to a teacher who has 30, 40 kids under her? So I think there's still a responsibility on the family unit. Yeah, at least in the formative years.
Just now you mentioned that there's different the three different groups, right? So what I'm curious is that does this influence from the three different groups change over time, in terms of the age of the child? So for example, if the child is in their preteen years, right, is there more influence from family or is it more towards peers?
You're a young adult. I mean, I would guess, and you guys can confirm, right, if it's true or not. I think as people mature, right, and then this developmental stage of trying to find out who I am and my place in the world, and in relation to other people, peers and others, right? CCA groups, all those interest groups, and they tend to take more of the time. I wouldn't say priority, but they take up a lot more time and exposure, and so a lot more modeling comes from there. Social learning comes from there, right? If family wasn't too strong before, right, then there's a bit of a disconnect, lah. Yeah. But would you say family is still strong for you guys?
In terms of influence,
yeah, or is it peers?
now it's like not really much on any like it feels like it's more like what I feel rather than what other people feel that I must follow, or that I feel that that's right, like I think I don't know that there's like an age or something that you start to fix yourself, and in terms of like what values or like what morals you stick to, and what is your way of life, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I think I'm more towards that already. Like, but previously, if you're talking about preteen years, right, I think for me it's actually my family more, because I spend a lot of time with family. So I'm that kind of child that last time like after school go back home, after school go back home. I don't stay after school one. Yeah, because I got school bus lah. Yeah, get school bus for your kids. Just kidding. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. What about you?
Wow. Now I think like I'm mature enough to recognize what behaviors or characteristics are good. So like, let's say my father is very generous, so I would tend to try to mimic him, not sort of like mimic him or like learn this kind of behavior while ignoring all the negative behaviors. So I think I'm at a point of my life where like it's easier to identify and pick up the good and leave out the bad. And while in pre-teen years, I think I'm not. Like opposite of Gabriel, I would tend to go off my friends. So I'll be more. I'll behave somewhat like my friends, but it's very weird because like I behave differently in secondary school and in ITE. So I really feel it really depends on like you said. I think the environment also plays a big factor, like the group of people that I hang out with. So maybe it's peers, because I behave very differently when I change schools. So I feel that for me it's more of peers.
Right.
I think for mine it's definitely family, but I think it's just cause that growing up I'm so used to like listening to them, and like the moment you get influenced by your peers, you are known to be rebellious. Like, oh, you're not listening to me, you're like with your friends and everything. And also, but I feel like if they notice a stage like this, they will start to pull you back, and like from then on we'll spend like a lot of quality time together. So it just became like a habit to like listen to my family. I don't know, to me their opinions matter more lah.
Is it filial piety? Like
I don't think so. I guess it's just like a habit law, cause like we spend a lot of time together ma. So obviously I will want to like listen to you, since like you're the one that with me making certain decisions.
It was a stronger formative bond, right? So good for you.
Yeah, but we all turned out great.
Yeah, you guys started.
Self-love, yeah, but so like you see, like there's 3 different examples here already. So like that means before the age of preteens, right? Like is it very important for like families to spend more time and quality time in order to like be able to have, I guess, more control, or rather more influence in terms of like what kind of habits you impart to the children?
Absolutely. I think in fact the literature supports this, right? So the formative years, if you follow Freud, you say age 1 to 6, these are the crucial bonding attachment years, and so usually if that's type, right, then family will always be the safe home base that the person can return to.
Right. Let's say if in the situation where family during that period of time of the child's age 1 to 6 were not very present, or doesn't have a lot of like time to spend with the child, then later on is still possible, right? To
absolutely. So this is, I think that's a great question also that you follow up with. it doesn't mean that if 1 to 6, I didn't have my dad and mom with me, I was a latchkey kid, that means my life is screwed up. There comes a point, like you said, right, where we realize we come into our own person, right? We make choices and we don't blame the past so much, right? At least this is what I believe. There are many different schools of thoughts out there, but once you come into this place of, I know enough to think and to make decisions for myself and I'm responsible, legally the age is 21 lah, right? You have become a full adult and all that, then we have a responsibility to ourselves, right? To kind of create our own path lah. Yeah, so that includes the qualities, the kind of values that we want to believe in, to the kind of person that we want to be and live out the rules that we have, that kind of thing.
Definitely, but I think ultimately still is very important for a family to be spending a lot of quality time, and like what you say, modeling good habits of resilience from young. I think that's exactly why there's a lot of kind of governmental support on that line of parenting. I know there are a few programs out there that like Families for Life, Kids Start. I don't know whether you heard about that before lah, but it focuses on like a lot of parenting skills and being able to I guess let parents understand like further on their role as a parent and how it really influences their child's development. Yeah,
absolutely, man. If there's any kid watching, right, I must say a word from my mentor, right? It's like, parents when they give birth to kids, right, they don't have a manual. Right, there's nothing that teaches them how to be a good parent.
Right.
So if especially you're a first kid like me, right, you learn and figure out along the way that parents just do the best that they can, right? So forgive their mistakes lah, right? I realized this sometime when I was like about 17. I was so angry with my parents, with the world, and all of those things. And like one day, but you're old enough to think, right? Right. So stop blaming and start, doing something about it lah. So that's part of my journey, which is why it comes into how I've also believe and formulate my thinking about life, which is it comes a point where we are responsible and we can choose how we want to be.
I think that's a great point also, because one of the parents that I conducted my community mapping interview, he said something along the lines of like, when you're expecting a child, you wouldn't think, okay, I want this child to be a doctor, I want this child to be a lawyer, whatever. You just want the child to be healthy. So I think it's somewhere along, like, it's a very innocent and very touching moment. And like you said, parents are trying their best and trying to make the child happy and healthy. Yeah.
There's no license for parenting out there.
True.
Yeah, should there be? That's a topic for another day. Right. So usually at the end of, I think we are reaching the end of the podcast already lah. So usually at the end of the podcast, we always have a few final words or closing words by the expert. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. The expert, the counselor. Yeah, right. Yeah. So do you have any final words for the viewer, parents out there?
Shy of being like cliche, right? It's like this stigma about mental wellness and if you need help, right, seek help, why not? There's this tagline that goes around, right? And then it's okay not to be okay lah. I think it takes great courage. And one of my students asked me recently, right, and the issue I want to talk about was, I've been secretly coming to counselling for a long time, and I feel so embarrassed, I feel so weak, like why only me? Right, that really broke my heart because it speaks to the stigma that's still out there. I think I want to use the analogy of seeing a doctor. We all get sick and we all need to see a doctor at least once in our life. Right, or more. And there shouldn't be any fear or shame in just coming forward to say, I need help. So I want to acknowledge that rather than a show of weakness, it takes a lot of courage to actually come forward and to do that. And the benefits is not only for ourselves, but in the process of learning skills, and to help ourselves, we also then are equipped now to help our loved ones and others around us. So if anyone is in pain, right, do come out and seek help.
Definitely. Mental health is for everyone. Yeah, it's something everyone struggles and grows with. Yeah. Right. All right, we've come to the end of the first podcast. Thank you so much, Mr. Donovan, for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, your insights have been very good and very useful for the audience. Yeah, I'm sure that the audience learned a lot from today's discussion. Yeah, so thank you everyone so much for watching today's podcast. If you like what you watched today, please stay tuned because there are 4 other podcasts coming up soon, right? So apart from this, actually, we have left the link down in the description below for a Padlet whereby you can send your questions pertaining to this topic, anything at all, and we'll send it to Mr. Donovan and he'll get back to you guys on it. We'll post on our social media. Yeah. So please stay tuned for the next few podcasts, and I think we'll also be leaving a few hotlines and helplines down in the description below. So if you're a person who is in pain or you want to seek help or want to know more about mental health, you can also check out the description down below. Yeah, I think that's all from us. We'll see you guys next week. Right. Thank you everyone for watching. Bye bye.
Bye bye.